Today's video is how you can figure out how to rehab basically any injury on your own. I'm just sick of telling people to go see a physio, which is probably the advice that you should give a lot of the time. But then over 50% of physios don't practice according to evidence-based guidelines. Don't ask me where I pulled that statistic from. So I thought while we could encourage people to see a physio when they do hurt themselves, I could also equip people with the knowledge that'll help them if they're unable to get to a good physio or if you just want to have a go at it yourself. And in between that, I'll be slapping arms and hammies. If you want an insight into our whole training system, we've got GPP level 1. It'll give you a complete overview on how we coach strength, plyometrics, sprinting or high-speed running, Olympic lifts, how we integrate gymnastics into our strength training, how we combine lifting weights and building muscle and strength, as well as increasing endurance at the same time. So if you're interested in hybrid training or maybe just gaining some more really solid strength and conditioning principles, I highly recommend you check out GPP Level 1, and you can check out the link for that below this video. Anyway, getting back to our body's amazing healing powers and how you can harness them, basically no matter what injury you've done to yourself. I want to introduce you to a concept called natural history. And so what the natural history describes is just the time frame of expectation we have for an injury to heal itself with no other intervention. And I think a lot of people are completely oblivious to this concept. They think that if you don't actively rehab or go see a physio, that you're never going to get better. But our body has this innate and tremendous ability to just heal itself, assuming that you're not doing too many things to continuously aggravate the injury, or you're not living too unhealthy of a lifestyle, or having too many, I guess we'll call them comorbidities. And so when we're conducting trials on different interventions that are supposedly good for rehabbing certain injuries that have happened to different parts of the body, what they'll be tested against is the natural history of the injury. All right, so to give you a bit of an example, I believe the natural history of lower back pain is on average anywhere between 2 to 6 weeks, which I think is really good information to spread because so many people just freak out and they think that they're doomed forever as soon as they've hurt their back from lifting, when reality is it's a very common injury and it often resolves itself really quickly. And so the natural history for different injuries and different parts of the body, it does change, and it's not always as good as just a couple of weeks. For example, things like sciatica or plantar fasciitis, the natural history for those I think could be up to a year. And while this may not be the most favorable prognosis for a lot of people, at the very least, it helps you manage your expectations. So if you do pick up some sciatica or you do get some plantar fasciitis, you're not stressing if the intervention that you've chosen doesn't fix it up in a couple of weeks or even a couple of months. Because again, we've set this expectation that plantar fasciitis or sciatica, it just takes a while for your body to deal with that. But yeah, I just think having a good understanding of natural history and what that really means, it just sets this amazing foundation to build off to then really take on your own rehab journey yourself. And I'll explain what I did to rehab my shoulder recently. A lot of you who've been following on with my YouTube and my Instagram, you know that I was dealing with a bit of a shoulder injury for the last few months and it's recently come good. And this shoulder injury really tested my faith in this process. But now that I've come out the other side of it, if anything, it's just given me more confidence on it. I've doubled down. All right, so the shoulder injury started out like all good shoulder injuries do. I was trying to increase my bench press in a quick time frame. And basically, my view of it is when it comes to increasing your bench press, it's basically just about finding the maximum amount of bench pressing you can do without hurting your shoulder. Because more bench pressing equals bigger bench presses. But then too much bench presses equals sore shoulders, maybe elbows, it depends. And so that sort of set off a cascade of events. I was just sort of, really fucking around and finding out with my bench press volume and intensity. And just as I started to get my first sort of shoulder flare up and thought I was going to need to ease off for a little bit, then in that same session, I went and did a overcoming calf isometric, but I was sort of in the squat rack with the bar across my traps. And then, just trying to plantar flex or trying to calf raise into the bar. And I must have put a lot of force into the bar because as soon as I hopped out from under the barbell, my neck and my shoulder, it just felt completely cooked. I don't know if I compressed my first rib or did something to a nerve, but the whole shoulder was fucked. I couldn't really turn my head either. So then I just went into load management mode. I dialed back training. I tried to remove a couple of the activities that I found really provocative, which is unfortunately a lot of things. I couldn't even put a bar across my back to squat. Any real pressing over a 30 to 40% intensity was provocative. But sure enough, when I took away the things that were aggravating it, natural history ran its course and the shoulder started to come good again. But then just as I really felt like I was on the upswing and ready to get back into some intense training, I was out in the surf one day and I absolutely scorpioned it into a sandbar. I've never hurt my shoulder this bad in my life. I haven't experienced that much pain in quite a while. I just came up clutching my shoulder. It was just one of those ones where I was honestly too scared to move it. I'd completely blown my shoulder to smithereens. Like, it was honestly one of those things where I was like, fuck, how sore does your shoulder need to be before you just drive yourself to hospital? But anyway, yeah, I walked home with my arm sort of tucked in. I was thinking about making myself a sling because even sort of when I just left my arm to hang, even that sort of provoked the pain a little bit. So I was just sort of doing my best to bundle my arm up and sort of carry it around with me. So I let it calm down for about an hour or so. And then I was just thinking to myself, you know, if I go to the hospital and get a scan, based on the findings, how is that going to change how I approach rehabbing this injury? And I was like, well, it's not. Whether it's dislocated, bruised, subluxed, or whatever the hell I've done to it, I'm just going to take it easy for a little bit and then build back into training as I can. And so that's basically what I did. That afternoon, I came into the gym and I just established some baselines. I just found out what training I could do, which I was actually surprised I could do some pressing with the machines. Every now and then I would just get like a crazy shooting pain, but what was sort of interesting about it is it wasn't really direction or force vector specific. It was sort of like whatever range of motion I went through, there was, you know, decent amount of pain, and then every now and then just this really big lightning bolt of this shocking pain that sort of took my breath away a bit. And don't get me wrong, even though a lot of this training that I was doing was really painful, it wasn't any worse than the pain that I was dealing with just walking around with the shoulder. Or like, I couldn't sleep on this side for, it was like total like 2.5 months I couldn't sleep on my right side. And the one thing I did do, which I think was really good, is I just set some expectations in my head. You know, I didn't know what I'd done to my shoulder, but I knew the time frame that I was comfortable with experimenting with the rehab on my own. And I just sort of gave myself a 3-week window where if I saw some progress and I thought my shoulder was starting to get better, then I'll just continue the rehab journey on my own. Whereas if I felt like my rehab wasn't progressing or if my symptoms were getting worse after a couple of weeks, then I'll go get a physio and maybe go get a scan of the thing. All right, so triceps banded JM press into that like cable, single arm cable tricep extension. And then for biceps, I'll either go a barbell curl or this single arm cable curl, and then into some heavy hammer curls. Typically rep ranges between 8 to 10 and 0 to 1 RIR. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't go to a physio or some sort of rehab professional if you've injured yourself. I just think there's a whole bunch of people who probably wouldn't hit up physio nearly as much if they knew all these things about natural histories and load management. And especially if you don't have a relationship with a really solid physio, like trying to find a good physio, it's a bit of a needle in a haystack. And like you can say that about trainers. Trainers on average are probably a lot worse than physios and other rehab professionals, but it is what it is. Most people who go to a physio probably end up just getting noceboed. It just got to the point where I got sick of telling people to go to a physio when I know that, you know, they can just take it easy for a bit and their body's going to bounce back pretty much 100% of the time. Where physios do play a key role for stuff like this is if you are concerned, or if you think you might have red flags. I kind of made a joke about it with back pain, but if you're getting some crazy referral with your back pain, or it's just a pain that feels like no other sensation you felt before, or if you're having incontinence or you're losing feeling in different parts of your body, these are absolutely more than valid enough reasons to go to a physio. And so that's what it is. I think there's this assumption in the lifting community that as soon as you've got a bit of a boo-boo, you need to outsource it to a physio. And I just want to empower people to be like, look, going to a physio for minor injuries and niggles like this, it's a real personal choice. If you think you can handle the rehab process on your own, you probably can. Because all those funny little rehab exercises you get given, they're really just there to keep you entertained and keep you moving a bit while the body heals itself. I think a lot of people, they have this idea in their head, they're like, no, I need to go to the physio to get the magic exercises. Half of the time, these physios have no fucking clue what they're doing. Like I said, they're just trying to distract you and they're hoping that the body heals you and then they get the credit for it. A good physio will probably never give themselves that much credit for fixing you because they'll know how much the body did the work for them. I've recently upped my weight for hammer curls to the 15 kilo dumbbells, but I thought I'd do it seated just for consistency. So I've been doing sets of 8. Usually I can get out like 3 sets of 8 with a rep in reserve. But I just questioned whether or not I was swinging my weights. So if I sit down, I don't have to concentrate on that as much. And we'll see if I'm actually getting stronger or if I'm just being more efficient with my body English. I think that was actually all right. I probably haven't been swinging them too much, so that's exciting. So the biggest thing you can do to bolster your body's innate ability to heal itself is just to be a really healthy person. So things that will improve your overall health, making sure you're sleeping good, making sure you're eating a lot of nutritious food. When you're injured, it's probably not the time to be in a big calorie deficit. You probably want to be erring on a calorie surplus. Trying to manage all the different forms of stress that we encounter, whether it's work stress, existential stress, family stress, or relationship stress. Again, a lot of these things aren't completely in our control, but we can still be mindful of them. So say if you have had a bit of a shitty week or a flare up in your rehab, if you've had a lot of uncontrollable stress, you need to give yourself some grace and reset your expectations about your rehab journey sometimes. And then on the exercise front, like I said, it's really just about doing your best not to piss the injury off. And then we sort of divide people into two different camps, or I like to divide people into two different camps. Yoga, I always edit you out. And so typically what we have when it comes to rehab, and so the two camps when it comes to rehab, you've got people that are a bit too tough for their own good, and they're always a little bit too keen to progress, and maybe they poke into pain a bit too aggressively, and they end up setting themselves back because they just have too many flare-ups along the way. They're trying to progress faster than their body is healing. And then you have these people on the complete opposite end of the spectrum where they're so fearful and anxious throughout the rehab process that they never want to poke into pain, and they end up delaying the healing process or not realizing how much progress they've made through this healing process because they never want to test anything because they're just so fearful of either provoking the pain or making their symptoms worse. And so it's really useful for helping people understand what side of the fence they fall on, and that'll also help you coach them appropriately through this, or if, like I say, if you're rehabbing yourself, it'll help you better understand yourself and your strengths and weaknesses when it comes to this process. The more and more we learn about training and rehab, the more we realize that they're much more similar than different. Both training and rehab are essentially just about finding an exercise or training plan that meets the person where they're at. So when someone is injured, they're really just lacking fitness at the end of the day. And it might be for slightly different reasons, but the process is just the same. So we just regress it as much as we need to help them get an effective workout. Or hell, if they're that beat up or that injured, maybe it's not even about getting an effective workout, it's about just keeping that part of their body moving however we can. Yeah, that's basically the long and short of it. Natural history describes the timeline that we can expect any condition to get better without any sort of extra intervention. Your body is the best physio that you'll ever have. It takes care of most of the work for you if you don't get in the way of the healing process. And one of the biggest keys to a successful rehab journey is just managing your expectations along the way. So that's where going to a physio and getting a diagnosis initially can be really helpful for a lot of people. But like I said, the reason I'm hesitant to recommend just going out there and finding a physio for a diagnosis is a lot of them will probably just scare the shit out of you. I don't know. If you're a physio, let me know in the comments if I was too harsh or if you think my synopsis of the average physio was correct. Like I said, I'm not saying personal trainers are better on average. I'm just saying that on average, personal trainers and physios both absolutely suck ass when it comes to rehab, or at least evidence-based rehab. And if you want to learn more about how we do things here at General Physical Preparation, check out GPP Level 1. There's a link for the course down below. I'll see you in a few days with another video.